Hello, my name is Leah Osko, and today I would like to discuss the importance of reducing aggression in the workplace. When you're a young adult who is about to enter the workforce with little to no knowledge on how to productively resolve conflict, it can actually be really intimidating, approaching those hard conversations. So we will address some of the ways that you can take a pause and calmly address these situations. So first, I want to start off with why is this important to understand? Why are we talking about this? And here's a couple of reasons. Here, wait, is this? Yeah. So here's a couple of reasons as why to this is a vital discussion. First, I know that when I was in high school, this was never really taught to me, and unfortunately, many young adults have to learn how to navigate these conflicts on their own. Productive resolution strategies do not come easily to most people, so this will be a safe environment to learn how to approach these hard conversations. Next, we will also be discussing the different tendencies that we all have when it comes to these aggressive behaviors. So that you know better how to avoid your own sometimes unhelpful tendencies in real life conflicts. Lastly, high emotional intelligence leads to more productive conflict resolution. So, growing our emotional understanding will be something that will continue to benefit us the rest of our lives. Because whether you like it or not, you will continuously run into conflict your whole life. So, what will this look like? So first we're going to learn and identify the ways that we express anger, learning what aggression is and how those tendencies work. And then we'll be talking about strategies that we can implement to lead towards more productive conflict management. And then we'll be looking at application. So we'll be looking at common conflicts and learning how to work on resolving them in the best manner. And this whole time we're going to be talking about how to take a pause during conflict and how beneficial that can be when we're in conflict, learning how to take a pause, take a breath, and calm down. So first, we're going to identify our tendencies. I want you to ask yourself, how do I usually approach conflict? Do I avoid the conflict altogether by either distracting myself with other things in my life, or with technology, or with sports, or clubs, which aren't all bad, but it's important to learn how to address conflict. Or do I tend to suppress my emotions and hold grudges towards against the people I love? Do I get very aggressive and hurt the ones that I love with harsh words? Or even do I harm others or myself? Or do I immediately bring it up with the person and maybe say things that I didn't think through? Um, think to yourself about this. Think about your tendencies, and we'll continue to talk about the ways that they develop. And I just want you to have maybe in the back of your mind what this looks like. Um, so we typically we learn how to address conflict through the people around us, through our peers, through the way our parents reacted towards conflict. I think a really good example of this is the Bobo doll experiment, which was done in about 1960s. Down here you can see a photo, and on the top um, layer here, you see a parent, abusing this toy doll. And later on, as the experiment develops, you see pretty much all the children learn to be very aggressive towards this doll, which is honestly a really good explanation as to how we will take on aggressive tendencies that the people around us has shown us our whole lives. And I think too that this is really common in just our peers. I know that when we're around more people that who are more aggressive physically or verbally, we tend to, do those aggressive tendencies, or we're around people who gossip and, are more passive aggressive with aggression, we will also pick up on those tendencies as well. So there's a very strong correlation between emotional intelligence and traditional, intellectual skills, which means like math and reading. And that means that typically students will struggle with conflict resolution if they struggle with math and reading and those intellectual skills. So overall, this could affect your success in the workplace if you are, struggling to relate to your coworkers in a healthy, productive manner when things do come up. Um, then next we're going to be talking about what aggression really is. So, aggression is really just defined as a behavior that one intends to harm another that doesn't want to be harmed. Reactive and abrasive, appetitive aggression, hostile, verbal, and physical. So, reactive can be like if somebody hurt you or something, then you would do something to retaliate to that person. The next one would just be reacting. Well, it wouldn't be reacting to an aggressive tendency. It would be the want to be aggressive to somebody else, without really a reason to do so. And then the next would be hostile, just being hostile to others and verbally, being aggressive to somebody, saying things that is rude, and then physically harming another person would be the last one. So there are two main strategies in to overcome our tendencies. They are cognitive reprisal and expressive suppression. So cognitive reprisal changes the way that you view a situation to reduce aggressive tendencies. A good example of this would look like, say you're in the workplace and you're under the impression that your boss was in the process of sending out a big email to the team today with valuable information for the project you're working on. You overhear your coworkers talking about the email, saying information you haven't heard of yet. So you ask them, has the email been sent out yet? And they respond, yes. Did you not see it? Using cognitive appraisal, you can think to yourself, my must have forgotten to add me to the email. I do understand that the whole office has been under a lot of pressure with this project, so I'll just send him a calm email explaining that I did not receive it. So here they really just think about what had happened and they take a pause and slow down and calmly respond back to their email. Which moving on to the second strategy, which would be expressive suppression. So this would be suppressing your anger in hopes of reducing aggressive actions. So the example said previously, it would look something like, um, my boss must have forgotten to put me on the email. He has been making a lot of mistakes recently with the stress of this project. I have to email him and explain why he has made yet another mistake. So here, in attempts to suppress their feelings, they would have ended up with writing a very passive-aggressive email to their boss, which honestly would have just been, adding to the problem where in the first example, they would have been resolving it and calmly coming up with a solution. So here we can see that taking a pause and rethinking can have a lot better outcome and just a lot more success in the workplace. So typically in workplace conflicts, it is best to approach the conflict as quickly as possible while also giving yourself time to cool off and take a pause. This is to avoid maybe any emotions getting in the way and affecting um, the resolving the conflict. So the ways to approach workplace conflicts can vary per situation. However, listed are some of the ways that we can manage these conflicts. First, this can be through like open communication. This may prevent many conflicts in the future. This consistent communication will rid any confusion, false information, and any other situations. Next, conflict coaching, which can look something like sitting down, learning about the ways that conflict can be avoided or resolved. This can prevent conflict getting out of hand. which can lead to both parties being frustrated and feeling misunderstood. Um, and instead, it helps, helps the knowledge of the workers working there, um, and avoid conflict altogether. And then there's mediation, which when one individual is trained, they will step in and help the both parties to come to a solution. Similar to that, there is peer review, which is when a panel of trained peers in the workplace listens to the conflict and help the parties come up with an unbiased solution. And then lastly, a formal investigation, which is the final and last step in resolving conflict. This one would be when conflict just gets way too out of hand and HR would have to get involved, to disarm the situation. So next we have some application. I'm just going to be giving some almost quiz-like questions, and I want you to think to yourself, maybe what would the answer be, and I'll read them aloud. And yeah. So the first one is you worked hard on a project, but your supervisor only points out what needs improvement. Your first thought is they think I'm terrible at my job. So the first option would be ignore the feedback and avoid your supervisor. The second would be tell your coworkers your supervisor is unfair. The third would be remind yourself that constructive feedback is meant to help you and improve, and it does not mean that you're a bad employee. And then the last option would be to keep your frustration inside and pretend that everything's fine. So you can think to yourself and answer the question. Pause if you need a second. The answer is C. So remind yourself that construction feedback is meant to help you and improve you, and it does not mean that you're a bad employee. So I think this also would be a really good example of, taking a pause and understanding maybe why somebody is doing the action that they're doing, to help, further the project or whatever you're working on. Next is a coworker interrupts you several times during a team meeting. So the first answer is assume they don't respect you and become defensive. B is consider they may be excited, nervous, or unaware that they're interrupting. Then address it and then address it after the meeting, calmly after the meeting. C would be to interrupt them every time they speak. And then D would be to stay angry for the rest of the day. So pause if you need a second, but I'm going to show the answer now. It is B, consider that they may be excited, nervous, or unaware that they're interrupting, then address it calmly after the meeting. And then the last question is a coworker forgets to include your name on a presentation. A is to assume they did it on purpose. B, refuse to help them again. C, complain about them to everyone else. D, consider that they may have been an honest mistake, then politely ask them about it. So you can give a second, think to yourself. And the answer is D. Consider that they may have made an honest mistake. Okay, so the idea of this is to take a pause. It's really helpful in these sorts of issues and conflicts to just take a pause. It will never hurt, and it honestly will prevent a lot of emotions and things that, shouldn't have been said or, yeah, that just were unhelpful. Here is my works cited for this, and thank you for listening.